Hey guys, it's Ty and welcome back to my channel. So this is another video, a part of my end of the year video series. So I've already done all of the books that I DNF'd in 2024. I did my most surprising reads of 2024. So I will have both of those videos linked down below in case you guys are interested. But today we are talking about my most disappointing / worst books of the year. Now for me, what I consider a disappointing read are books that I have been really looking forward to, and for one reason or another, they have let me down. All of these except for one are just disappointing reads. Just books that I had really high hopes for, but they let me down. However, there is one book, and you guys, if you have been here all year, you know what book I'm talking about. But there is one book that I despise that I'm going to talk about at the very end. So stick around for that. But we will go ahead and get started. So the first book that I have here is Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch. This is the second book in the Gentleman Bastard series. And this took a turn because last year, the same time last year, I was talking about how much I loved the first book in the series. It made it into my top books of the year for last year. Unfortunately, this one was a bit of a disappointment for me. I still liked our main characters, Locke and John. They are still coming up with like these schemes, and like the whole book we're following them with like this one scheme and all of the different issues and all of the different players that are a part of this scheme. So in this one, however, I did not like the pacing. I wasn't really a fan of the flashbacks in here. They served a purpose, but I still didn't really think that they were needed. And then a large part of this book takes place out on the sea, apparently. But I'm not the type of person that really likes books that deal with like boats or scenes on boats, because I don't know anything about a boat. A lot of the stuff that they're talking about, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what part of the boat that is. I don't know what's going on. And there was a big section in here where our two main characters were just getting trained on this boat. And I just could not. It was taking me a long time to get through this. I actually buddy read this with Tori over at Tori Morrow. I will leave her channel link down below. We had similar thoughts about this book, but I did like how it all came together, just like I did with the first one. And I am intrigued to read the next book in the series just because we're finally getting the introduction to a character that has been mentioned in both of these books, and I'm excited to see where that goes. But I settled on 3 stars for this. Didn't hate it, but definitely did not like it as much as I liked that first book. The next book that I have here that was a huge disappointment for me is Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. So this was my first book by Geneva Rose. I have heard a lot of mixed things about her books. They are either a hit or miss with people, but I was really excited about this because I heard so much hype about this, and I actually like this edition. So even though I did not really care for this book, I'm keeping it because I like it, how it looks. But in this, we are following these 3 siblings, and their mother passed away. But I believe it's the oldest sibling. Right before the mother passed away, she had whispered something to this older sibling, and now they have to figure out what they're going to do with that information. We find out early on that their father had went missing, and so that's part of the whole mystery in this story. This book is not very long. I want to say it's not even 300 pages, or it's barely 300 pages, and it took me such a long time to get through it. I did not guess what was going on, but I did not like where it went. I wish it would have been anything but what we got, because that was too obvious. That was just the obvious thing. And I was like, no way. I did not like any of these siblings. So we're getting POVs from each of the siblings, which honestly, you didn't really need, because the main one that we're following is the older sibling. And so we could have just basically got the story from her POV, because some of the stuff we're getting the same information just from a different sibling. I don't know. This just did not work for me. There were other books that I wanted to try from this author. Let me just say, I am not in a rush to pick up anything else from this author, but if you have read multiple books from them, please let me know down below if you think I should pick up something else and what book would you recommend from this author. But this one, I did not like. Another book that was a huge disappointment, and I am not alone in this, that is Murder Road by Simone St. James. I was really looking forward to this one, and I was actually so happy that Book of the Month had this as an option, because sometimes those books that I'm really looking forward to, they don't have it as a pick, but this one they did. This is like my third, I think like my third book by her. And the other two books I actually really enjoyed, but this one just did not do it for me, but it had a really solid premise. So in this, we're following this couple. They're like traveling along this road, and they pick up this woman. I believe it was a woman. Yeah, they pick up this woman who was injured, and she's saying like some really crazy things. They get the girl to the hospital, but she ends up dying. And so then they're like suspected of murdering her, but then they decide to stick around in town so they can figure out what happened and what this girl was talking about. And they learn that other murders have taken place along this road. I just did not like this. I was confused by the end of it. There were parts in here that I kind of liked. There were like some paranormal bits, but it just didn't all come together by the end. And like I said, I was confused. I still don't really understand what happened at the end. And I don't know. I don't have much to say besides I just didn't like it. Then we have Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. Initially, I was really looking forward to this one. I was really looking forward to it. I was excited that we were finally getting a book from him where we're following the main character from a male perspective. And I was really looking forward to that. I was really excited to see like where Riley Sager was going to go with that. And he didn't go far. So in this, we are following this man. And when he was younger, he was having like the sleepover with his friend. They, pitched the tent in the backyard and they were having the time of their lives, I guess. And then when the guy woke up in the morning, he notices that there's like a slash in the tent and his friend is missing. And so all these years later, it's like 30 plus years later, he still doesn't know what happened to his friend. So at the beginning of the story, he moves back to his childhood home and he decides that he's going to try to figure out what happened to his friend. This was very slow, very, very slow. And this was a bit of it's almost 400 pages. We're just following his thoughts and how he felt all these years with his friend missing. There are some like paranormal bits that are like introduced. There are a lot of red herrings that don't really go anywhere. And then when you find out what happened, my mouth flew open, but for all the wrong reasons, because you cannot tell me that we sat through almost 400 pages and that's what happened? Ugh. I don't know. The only good thing about this book was we were introduced to this little boy. I think his name was like Henry. And he was so charming. And I did like his interactions with our main character. But honestly, that was the only thing that I liked. I could have done without this story. I almost DNF'd it so many times because it was just so slow. Like, I just could not believe how slow it was. And at a certain point, I just did not care about what happened to this little boy. Like, I didn't care why he was missing. I no longer cared. So, am I looking forward to Riley Sager's next release? Yes. I'm just always curious to see like where his stories are gonna go. But this one, did not work. Next up, we have The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. I might be the only one that didn't like this book, but I did not care for it. So this is like a cult story, and I vaguely like remember what happened. So this lady, finds out that her one of her best friends from college was found murdered, and then she like links up with another old friend who's now a podcaster, and they are just basically trying to figure out what happened to the girl, why she was murdered, and then she gets wrapped up in like this sex cult and stuff happens. Normally any stories with cults, like, I'm pulled in immediately. But this one just felt so repetitive. Like, we were getting flashback scenes with this girl, her best friend, and another girl that was also part of their friend group. And then we're in the present, but like in the present chapters, and her looking into this place where she believed the girl that was murdered was involved in, those scenes just started to feel really repetitive. This is like a darker story. The podcast element did not work for me because you could have had this same story without the podcast. There were sections where there was the podcast and this girl was basically just telling the story. I don't know. She was just telling the story of what happened to them back in the day, but you could have done that without the podcast. There was no reason for there to be like a podcast, and I'm here for podcasts, but not the way it was done in this. I don't know. I was just so uninterested. And like the ending, I'm not gonna lie, I did like how this ended. I liked kind of like where it went, but it just felt like it took a long time to get there. I don't know, this didn't work for me. I also read her other book, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. Now that one was more entertaining than this one, but I still didn't think it was as good as everyone said that it was. So I don't know, maybe I'm just not vibing with this author, but I just didn't care for this one. Now this is another one that saddens me a little bit, that I did not like this one as much. I rated it 3 stars, but this is Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. So in this, we're following this couple. They recently had a child and they're struggling a little bit. And I think they lived in New York, and they entered into like this housing lottery where they will be given like a place to stay basically. And so they win, and they're staying in this really like upscale apartment complex, but some strange things start to happen when they get there. Like, this wife believes she's seeing things, hearing things, like that sort of thing. If you have not read this, I'm gonna caution you and say, don't read a lot of reviews, because that's where I messed up. I read a couple of reviews that reveals what happened in this apartment. And I don't think those people are intentionally trying to spoil it, but I would say go into this not knowing anything. And I think the payoff of discovering what happens will hit you a little bit harder than it did for me, because I already knew. That's the only thing that really held it back for me, is I wish I just didn't know that. But because I already knew, it was like I was waiting for the characters to then find out. So it really took a lot of the enjoyment away. However, I did like how this author depicted our main character that we're following, because she is dealing with a lot of postpartum depression, and it talks a lot about her experience with that, and then her experience with her husband and how that's like affecting their relationship. Nat Cassidy has a really good author's note at the end that I would definitely check out if you're reading this. But this one just did not live up to the hype for me, and it's probably because I was just spoiled for what's going on. So I would say, please be careful when reading reviews for this if you have not read this yet, to avoid being spoiled like I was. But it's still, I don't know, it still felt a little long to me, even though it's not really that long. It just wasn't as good as I thought it was gonna be. Am I willing to check out something else from this author? Maybe, but I'm not in a rush. This next book, I for the life of me, I do not understand the hype. So this is First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston, a adult mystery thriller. And it also saddens me because I have this book signed, I think. Yes. I got this book signed. You can't really see it, but I went to the author event for this one here where I live. And the way that she was talking about it, I was really excited for it. I had seen like a lot of hype for it. I think it's already like being picked up for like a show. So I was really excited, but I was truly let down by this. So in this one, we're following this woman. She's a con artist and she's on another job, and her job that she's on it surrounds the guy that she's quote unquote dating. And throughout the story, we're getting like these flashback chapters of her other cons that she was like involved in. And at one point in the story, happens very early, she's at like this dinner party with her and her partner, and she meets this woman who is assuming her real identity. So the story kind of takes off from there. I didn't find anything really great about this story. I listened to this one. It was like one of those stories that I was just like listening to listen. I didn't find the mystery to be all that exciting. There's only like 4 characters you're following, so the story can only go so many different ways. That's why I prefer to have mystery thrillers have a large cast of characters, because it gives you more options into what is happening. I guess what was going on pretty early on. So I wasn't surprised by anything that took place. And I also just the story to me just wasn't interesting. So every time I see people talk about how much they love this, I wish I felt the same way, because I don't think I got the same story that everybody else got. I just don't think this was as good as everybody else is saying that it is. But it was fine. I got through it. I never necessarily wanted to DNF it, but I feel like I kept waiting for it to get better, and it never did. Next up, we have An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson. I recently read this, recently talked about it. This is another one I gave 3 stars. Didn't hate it, but didn't love it. Although this is another one where I saw so many good reviews. So in this one, we're following this girl. She is in a really tough place in her life. She just found out her fiance is cheating on her. That same night that she found that out, she gets this call from Drayton College where they want her to attend so that she can learn this magic. When she gets there, when she finally gets officially accepted into the school, she learns that they're teaching students the art of persuasion. In the midst of all that, there is a murder that takes place that now our main character and some other people are trying to figure out. For me, and I think this is backwards compared to other people, I thought the second half of this was way better than the first half, because that's kind of like when all of the action started. A lot of people say they like the first half better than the second half. But in the first half, it just felt like it was kind of slow. In the beginning, I was interested in this magic that they're learning, this art of persuasion. But the longer I read it, I was just like, okay, so they're learning this, but then when they get out of school, then what? Like, then what are you doing? I still never really understood like the purpose. I'm sure it's in there. I just missed it, I guess. But yeah, I just thought the second half was stronger once we had this mystery that was added into it and we started to get a lot of action. But for me, this was just fine. I have never read anything from this author previously, and I've heard a lot of good things about her other books. So I went into this with really high expectations, and unfortunately, I was just let down. Again, didn't hate it, but definitely didn't love it like everyone else. So the last book, the one I know you guys are waiting for, especially if you have not been here before, but the book that I would say was the absolute worst book of the year for me is The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. This is a young adult mystery thriller, I guess. So if you guys know, if you don't know, I love Holly Jackson. Every book that I have read from her thus far, they all have their own dedicated reviews, including this one. However, this one was definitely a rant review. When I recorded that video, I was actually sick. I don't think you can tell in that video, but I was sick. I didn't know if I wanted to film it. I didn't know if people would care because it's Holly Jackson and her books are loved. So, but I filmed it anyways. When I started off filming that, like I said, I was sick, but I was brought back to life with how angry I was getting the more I was talking about this book. So in this one, we're following our main character. I think her name is Belle. Yeah, we're following Belle. And like 17 years ago, her mother disappeared. And Belle at the time was like 2 or 3. And technically she was the last one to have seen her mother. So Belle and her father have decided to participate in this documentary that is talking about the disappearance of her mother. In the middle of them shooting this documentary, lo and behold, Rachel decides to show back up, and the story kind of takes off from there. I did not like Belle as a character, and I thought her attitude was terrible throughout this whole thing. I also just thought that there were so many plot holes. There were so many things in here that just did not make sense to me. Like, I have so many questions on how this whole situation would have even worked. If you guys want to know my full spoilery thoughts, I suggest you go and watch that video, because I talk about everything that happened, especially at the end of this, because it just did not make sense. I left this book with so many questions because a lot of stuff just did not make sense. I think I rated this one 2 stars. The more and more I think about that, I was being very generous. This is definitely a 1-star read for me. And it is a huge disappointment based off of the other books that I have read from Holly Jackson. Now, I know there are other people that really enjoyed this. Great. I love that for y'all. But I just did not. Now, am I waiting for her book that's going to be released next year? Absolutely. I'm definitely going to pick it up. It's her first like adult mystery thriller, and I can't wait to see what she does with that. But this one just did not work for me. And yes, I'm calling this the worst book of 2024 for me. So that is all that I have for you guys. If you have read any of these, please let me know your thoughts down below, and let me know whether or not you actually agree with me, or if you enjoyed it. I would like to know that as well. And please let me know, what is your worst book of 2024? But I will have the other 2 videos that are a part of the series, so my DNFs and my most surprising reads. I, again, will have those linked down in my description bar in case you guys want to check those out. But I will see you guys next time. Bye.